The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the QATV staff or board of directors. QATV, in compliance with FCC regulations, is prohibited from exercising control over the content of independent, member-produced public access programming.
Turn out the light. Believe. This is Greater Boston Paranormal.
Do you feel it? It went through like a path, like a wave.
Are you still here with us? What are your intentions?
Murder.
Hello everyone and welcome to Greater Boston Paranormal, the official TV show of the Greater Boston Paranormal Associates. I'm Michele Rosner.
I'm Sondra Morgan. Welcome back. We're glad to have you.
So before we get started, we have a very special guest tonight. We've got Kristin Bredimus, who is a spiritual consultant, and we'll be speaking with her shortly, but I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes telling you what the GBPA has been up to lately. Last Saturday, we had a pretty successful public investigation aboard the USS Salem. I think our guests left happy. It's just one of those things where the spirits never fail to disappoint. Sure. And I think that this time we met somebody new in a space that we typically don't take guests.
Right, so Michele and I, when we got down there, the two of us were like, oh, yeah, I want to run, really, is really how we felt, but it calmed down after a bit.
It did. I think whoever we were speaking to started feeling a little bit more comfortable with us being there, and the fact that we were trying to get to know them. So it was quite a bit better. So we're hoping this actually is somebody new. We do have a trickster on board that likes to pretend that they are somebody that they are not. So just hoping we'll connect the next time. But make sure that if you've not joined us on the Salem yet, check out uss-salem.org. Or the USS Salem Paranormal Experience. You can check out upcoming public investigations and ticket sales, and you can also do the day tour at the USS United States Naval Shipbuilding Museum. It's a self-guided tour on the Salem. You can check it out yourself. So make sure you check that out. We do want to talk a little bit about an event we've got coming up for those folks in Somerville. Your cable access television station at the Somerville Media Center is doing their telethon this coming weekend, and you might not be able to see it live, but they will have it on their streaming platform. The Greater Boston Paranormal Associates will be doing a
live investigation?
A late night live investigation and interview. So of the Somerville Media Center, which is in an old firehouse at 90 Union Square in the center of town. So we hope that you can check that out, and who knows, you might see us see this event on an upcoming episode of GBP TV.
Right. So as you know, we love to bring you interesting topics and amazing guests. And as Michele said, our next guest is not going to disappoint. Her name's Kristin Bredimus. She is from Salem, Massachusetts. She's a spiritual counselor. I believe she's also an energy practitioner and an ascension teacher. I also believe shaman and priestess could also pertain to her as well. She's had a lot of experiences. I mean, Michele and I spoke with her last week, and we were just amazed at some of the things that she's been through. And we'd love to bring her on right now so she can tell us all about it. Hi, Kristin.
Hi.
How are you?
Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Well, you are a well sought after spiritual consultant there in Salem, and we're happy that you could spend some time with us. I would like to get started about, you talked about having paranormal experiences when you were younger, and kind of it was like a trajectory to how you became a spiritual consultant. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely moments throughout my childhood of paranormal activity, but it all kind of came to a very dramatic head when I was in high school. And we had moved to a house in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And one thing that I hadn't mentioned to both of you was that on moving day, I brought my first box into my would-be bedroom. And when I came up from my second box, it was levitating. It was levitating a couple of inches off the ground. And that was the beginning of a series of paranormal experiences that I would always tell myself it was my imagination. Oh, I'm so tired. That must have been my imagination. And then fast forward, there was an event with a friend of mine who had been in a serious car accident that had dramatically altered his life. It had actually claimed the life of one of his parents. And he ended up staying in our home for a period of time after he got out of the hospital because he wasn't comfortable in his own house. And a few days after he left, I was at home by myself. I happened to be by myself over the weekend because my family had gone away. And that particular night, I had worked at a local restaurant. I had had a long shift. I was exhausted. I came home and I went to bed. I was woken up to the sound of the front door opening. And at that point, I just froze because the way that the house was set up, it was a really old house. It had been a barn at one point. My room was tucked away at the back, so there was no way for me to escape out of the space or hide. So I just tried to remain as still as possible. And since I was the only one in the house, I hoped that the intruder didn't know that I was there. But the footsteps immediately came up the stairs through the room into my room. And as soon as what I now know was an energy entered the space, I knew that this wasn't human because the energy of the space changed dramatically. The room became really cold. My eyes were closed. I was trying to be as still as possible, but I could see through my eyelids. It was like a blue-white color, and then my bed started violently shaking. There was also a noise that was kind of like a metallic, almost like a metallic clashing sound. So this was only moments, although every moment was terrifying. And I then was completely terrified. I'd never experienced anything that dramatic before because all of the things that we had heard in the house, it was mostly like one person would be downstairs, we'd hear walking upstairs. We kept thinking like, oh, maybe it's the neighbors next door. But this was undeniable that there was something in the house. So for whatever reason, I chose to call my friend who was the person who had been in the car accident. And he told me that there was a family friend who was a medium, and he gave me her number and said she'll be able to help you out. So that experience was really an initiation. This woman whose name, I only know her first name was Nora Lee. She made arrangements to come to my house, and this was something that she did out of the kindness of her heart. So I wanted to do something to thank her. So I asked my friend, and he said she loves sweets, she loves coffee, she loves flowers. So I had gotten her a few different things. It happened to be a really hot day. I put everything in the refrigerator, And a few minutes before she was supposed to arrive, I went to the refrigerator and everything was gone. And I had, again, was home by myself. I was the only person home, so I immediately became terrified. There was a knock on the door. I opened the door, Nora Lee's there. And as soon as I opened the door, there's a clash of thunder and it starts to rain. And I nervously laughed and said, "That's a strange coincidence." And she basically explained, "It's not. My heritage is Native American, and I've called in my spirit guides. So we're starting to lock down and surround your dwelling so that we can start to contain the energies that are there." So she then asked me what happened a few minutes ago, about 10 minutes ago, because I felt your energy, you were terrified. And I explained what happened, and she said, "This often happens, and oftentimes things will go missing, and if a person does any type of construction in their house at some other point, they might find all of the belongings hidden in the walls." And from there it began like a series of experiences. I mean, it was really like a poltergeist moment where we went into the kitchen, the kitchen cabinets flew open, plates were flying out, and at this point Nora Lee was narrating. There's an old woman in the kitchen who is throwing the plates because she doesn't want me here, and then she narrated, "Look out." And as she said, "Look out," I suddenly had the wind knocked out of me. And she explained that there had been a little boy that was in the bathroom. She had gone in to the bathroom to investigate the area, and he ran out and ran through me. So what she did at the time was kind of go room to room to consolidate all of the energies into the room that had the most activity, which had been my bedroom. And at that point, she essentially did what's called a spirit release, where she was crossing over the energies. And she had explained that these were disincarnated energies and that they needed help crossing from the earth plane over. So after that experience, I was relieved because I felt like, okay, that was too much for me to handle. It was really overwhelming, but thankfully she's cleared everything and now life can go back to normal. But it didn't go back to normal. And I ended up leaving the house and then came back later that night, and my family had returned, and they nervously met me at the door and they said, "Something really weird's going on in your bedroom." So when we walked up into the bedroom, it looked like everything was breathing. Every piece of furniture, everything was pulsating and breathing. I then called Nora Lee and she said, "I didn't want to say this, but I had a feeling that these energies were drawn to you, that they were woken up because of my friend's energy and his grief. So that resonance had stirred them up, but they were able to detect you. And so these spirits were able to see you." So she ended up coming back and she started a series of psychic testing, which was basically psychometry, where you hold an object and she would ask me questions. So whenever she asked me a question, I had an answer, even though I had no idea or had no experience like this before. And at the end of it, she taught me how to cross over the energies myself so that I could do it in the future. And through that experience, my clairvoyance opened where I could see the energies. So first, again, she had consolidated all the spirits into one room, and she advised me to squint my eyes. And as I squinted, I could see the outlines. And there was probably like 10 different energies in the space. After we had cleared the house, she said, "We need to go clear the area around your house because although there are often energies that are attached to a physical place or a physical object, there are also energies that are just outside of time and space. And I don't want you to be confronted every time you leave your house. So we walked around the house, and every time it became more vibrant, to the point where I could see clairvoyantly, objectively, meaning that with my eyes, I could see that there was a spirit. And again, after that, I was really terrified. So that began a period of time in which I was always sleeping with my mom. Norlie taught me how to close my aura down and to close my chakras and really kind of cloak and conceal myself. There was a period of time when initially, whenever I would leave the house, I would feel like energy touching me as I was walking down the street trying to get my attention. So I just spent days and weeks closing down the energy. I then eventually, a couple of months later, moved into Boston, where I had another paranormal experience. That's actually a very cool story if you want to hear it. If not, that was basically like an opening, which I was then immediately trying to close.
When you say opening, tell us a little bit about it.
So, meaning that throughout my life until that period of time, whenever there was anything unusual, something unexpected, I always told myself it was my imagination. So I always came up with a logical explanation for something that wasn't logical and wasn't my imagination. But from that point on, after I realized that I wasn't crazy because I had felt crazy, I was seeing things and hearing things. And the only reason why I knew that there was actually something there was because my family had had other experiences, not quite as vibrant, but they were able to say that they had also, because we had never talked about it. We had never said, do you hear the footsteps or that levitating box that first day? But we were able to kind of compare stories. And from that point on, I was plugged in until the invisible world, until I really tried everything to close myself down because it was too scary for me at the time.
Yeah.
How long of a period of time did you shut yourself down for? Because you came back.
Probably 2 decades,
Yeah.
about 20 years.
Okay.
So it was 20 years of shutting myself down. And what had happened, it was actually a health crisis that I had some unknown condition. I went from specialist to specialist. My complaints were extreme exhaustion, brain fog. I was in physical pain. I was totally exhausted. And then what happened was I eventually started wondering, do I have Lyme disease? I went the conventional route and no doctor could give me an explanation. So I ended up getting diagnosis such as fibromyalgia. And it just felt to me like this is not it. And the medication that I'm receiving is not helping me. It's making me feel worse. So something in me just switched over. And whenever anyone suggested anything, I said yes. So one of the first things that was suggested to me, actually, this was interesting. At this time, I just happened to have an opportunity to meet by happenstance a person named Damien Eccles. So Damien Eccles was infamously accused of the murder of 3 little boys in West Memphis. So there's several documentaries made about him and his friends at the time called Paradise Lost. So there's a trilogy of Paradise Lost. Damien essentially was a kid who wore black, listened to heavy metal, And so when these crimes were committed, the local authorities decided it was the kids that dressed in black and looked weird. So they were essentially framed for the murders. Damien was sentenced to death row. And then about 24 years, I think, later, he was released on an Alfred plea. And during that time, Damien, who he was a spiritual person, and as a teenager, he was really into the occult. He had spent the duration of his time in prison on death row and oftentimes in solitary confinement, meditating and practicing rituals and ceremonies. And his intention was to set himself free. So he manifested his freedom. He didn't manifest his innocence. So that became something that he would later try to prove. But upon being released from prison, his story was really a lot of people, a lot of musicians, artists, actors, a lot of people who identified with being on the fringe or black sheep, etc., really resonated with his story. So people were always interested in what had happened to him. And over his time, he became friends with a lot of celebrities, such as Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and Johnny Depp. So when he was released, he first was flown out to stay with Eddie for a while. And then eventually he and his wife, who he met while he was in prison, moved to Salem. So it was there that I met Damien, and he invited me to basically experience what's called Hermetic Reiki. And that was my first exposure to any type of energy work. And after Damien worked on me, I was normal for a 2-week period of time. So that experience, and then again saying yes to everything, it became a total shift in my life, where I then decided I'm going to have to resurrect something within me that's completely a natural part of who I am, because I am not able to function the way that I used to function. My brain doesn't work the way that it used to. And for whatever reason, when I was trying to figure out what is that thing, I thought, well, when I was in high school, I lived in this haunted house and I had these experiences and I saw a ghost, and a lot of people haven't had that experience or they don't see ghosts. So maybe that's the natural thing. And from there, I went on a journey to try to figure out, how do you open up? Because I knew how to close down. And when I closed down, I didn't even really know what I was closing down. I just knew that I was assuming the position of like a mummy, drawing everything in and closing myself down. And then that started a series of events where it's like the universe laid out the breadcrumbs and I followed the trail, which eventually led me to London.
So, Kristen, that kind of story that you told about closing yourself down really resonated with me, because that was something that I experienced as a young person. As a child and adolescent, I was constantly bombarded with different energies and also memories of past lives. And so as I became, I guess about the age of 12, I had really terrible anxiety. I didn't sleep as a child. I slept with a nightlight on until I was 14. I had to do that. I had to close myself down. And so, when we were talking about that, I was like, man, can I really relate to that? And it wasn't until just maybe 7 or 8 years ago that I had a personal experience that really kind of made me explore how to open myself up and deal with those types of experiences, seeing spirits, feeling other people's energies, because I was desperate to find a way to help my daughter.
wow.
I'm fairly certain that if I had not done that as a teenager, we probably would have had poltergeist activity in my house because it was pretty. I was a pretty intense person. And I think that some of our viewers probably can relate to all of that as well. So if, what advice would you give to people who are experiencing just that, and with the hope that they wouldn't have to go through decades of figuring it out before being comfortable with who you are and what is normal for you?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for asking me that, because that's one of my missions. I'm really passionate about that because I know how traumatic it was for me. So one of the first things I would say to everybody is everything is real. Everything is real. And I would also say that I personally believe that as a society, we have been disempowered by believing that the imagination is a bad thing, or it diminishes what our experience is, when the reality is that the imagination is the mechanism. It's the mechanism to plug into all different frequencies, all different dimensions. The other thing that what I always tell everybody is that every single person on the planet is psychic. Every single person, because there's a reason why we are experiencing these things, and that's because we have a light body system or a subtle body system. So that's the chakras, that's the aura, and that's, Michele, what you and I were closing down, even if we didn't know what we were closing down. So it's one of those things that when children are born, they're open, and they are, as their chakras are developmental. So every single child is developmentally corded to their biological mother. And what happens is your chakras are her chakras until developmentally different parts of your life you're developing them, and in that journey, the root chakra is in utero, and then until you're about, it's kind of parallel to when cognitively the brain is finished developing, so in your early 20s. So if people want to start to have some mastery of this, it's learning how to turn on when you want to have an experience and to turn off when you don't want to have an experience. So a lot of times when Hollywood shows us about paranormal activity, especially if we see mediums, we're always seeing mediums kind of in these spaces in public where energies are just going up to them, and it's like they don't have any control over it, or that might be what it feels like to the viewer, when the reality is you can close yourself down, you can be hidden or cloaked when you're not ready, because as both of you know, most paranormal activity happens in the middle of the night. It's dark, it's scary, sometimes you'll be asleep and then you're woken up, but you can have the same experiences in broad daylight. And I know that for myself, that was easier to have when I could see things, when I had more sense of control. So learning how to open up and shut down, and the mechanism is learning about the chakras, learning how to ground to the earth, how to raise your frequency, connect to the cosmos, and then drop into the heart space. So every single person can do it. And that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is teaching people how to do it, because not only does it make life less terrifying for the intuitive, the sensitive, the empath, it also allows everybody to really get into their superhuman potential, really unlock their own divinity.
So let's if we can go back just for a moment to that connection to your biological mother. I think that's, again, something I can definitely relate to. I was adopted as an infant. So I was not.
I knew you were. As soon as I said that, I knew that, and it's so interesting too. So sorry, go on.
No, so raised by a completely different set of parents. I had a lovely childhood, about as normal as you could possibly have. When I was 29 years old, I met my biological mother. She was looking for me. The interesting part about it is that this gift was passed from her family, and one of the tragic things about it was, she was the youngest of 4 siblings. This was in the 50s and the 60s, when not a lot was talked about in terms of mental health and spirituality. Most people were raised Catholic. This was not a cool thing. Tragically, her 3 siblings, their lives ended early. 2 of them due to suicide, and her brother due to he contracted HIV and AIDS due to just drug use and just behavior, unsafe behavior, and she was the only one left. So this is a long line, and as a matter of fact, it went into my generation. So my biological mom's nieces also, lost a couple of them to suicide. So it got to me, and I was fine with it got to me, but then when it got to my daughter, I had to say, that is enough. We need to figure out how to handle this. And so that's kind of led to my journey over the last maybe 7 or so years.
And Michele, that's something that I come across all the time with my work with people, especially like I have a very eccentric toolkit, and there's a lot of different things that I will work with people on. But one of the things in that kind of mission to help people understand who they are, there's a real common theme of mental illness that is actually extrasensory perception, and because we're told it's our imagination, so many people are so invalidated, and what they're experiencing isn't understood. One of the things that I have come to realize is everybody assumes initially that their experience, whatever their experience is everybody else's experience. Right. So if you are the person that is always feeling things, sensing things, knowing things, you don't know that that's not how everybody else is going through life until you start talking about it. And when you start to get the reaction of, what are you talking about? There's usually a judgment that comes immediately with that. So it is interesting that there are lineages of people that, in spite of the fact that our culture has suppressed this, and I really believe that this esoteric knowledge, which is really just the knowledge of who you actually are, who we actually are, is physical, and it is an etheric element too. That there's reasons why that this has been suppressed information. Right. So for your birth mother and her family, this is a family of sensitives. Yes. And empaths, we don't feel the good stuff, unfortunately. We're sponges, and we often take the heavy emotions. And a lot of times I'll jokingly describe myself as like the human vacuum, or like the garbage can, because I will absorb whatever the lower, denser feelings were. And I'm sure you know, Michele, and I know Sondra also, you also know too, because you're also an empath, that when you're young, it feels like I'm depressed, I'm anxious. And then if you are lucky enough to learn what empath is and have somebody that actually knows what it means, then you start to realize that, wow, maybe this isn't all of my energy. Maybe I was, I was energetically corded to my biological mother, and some of this anxiety that I had, in spite of the fact that my adopted family and my home and my childhood was really happy, that there was something else, and it was that energetic connection.
Yeah.
You know, I know I brought my daughter to see you as well because she's definitely an empath, and you helped ground her. She still, she still struggles. She still struggles. She still doesn't really get it. I try to explain it to her, honey. You're picking up the energies of the people around you, and how can you get through to someone, that they're, they're not. There's not anything wrong with them, because she always thinks that there's something wrong with her.
Yeah, I know. This is one of the parts that I think is really tricky, because with anything spiritual or energetic, it's kind of, there's a need to be in both places. So there's a need to be grounded and practical and open to a person that maybe is having a mental health crisis. And while also being aware that this could be energetic, it could be spiritual, and even when we go into it could be spiritual, that can mean a lot of different things. We could have a soul contract. So your daughter may have volunteered before she was human. I'm here and I'm going to deeply understand and learn about human emotions and human experiences. And I want to help the humans by taking away whatever their burdens are. So I personally, because with the work that I do, we can't make anyone know or believe anything until they're ready to know and believe it.
That's true.
And that's, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, it's always that conclusion. And one of the things that I have a client who's a neuroscientist, so she and I will talk a lot I try to make sense of what is going on in the world a lot. And I developed this theory that we're each living in a different dimension. So in my dimension, all of these things are so obvious, and why don't people know what I know and believe what I believe? And at the end of the day, what it really is a frequency. So until your daughter is higher in her frequency, where she's able to start to either be curious or feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, then her reality is going to be that this is overwhelming. And it is overwhelming.
It is, yeah.
That's why I know for a fact, because I've had the experience and I work with a lot of people, that it's really important for us to know our energy, and by knowing our energy, we can detect when that's not my energy. I was feeling happy. Why am I totally sad or angry now?
I know. It's amazing how quickly it comes on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's really sudden. And again, it's that empath. You're going through your day and all of a sudden you've absorbed somebody's energy. And it could even be just literally walking through, because our energy field, our aura, it can be anywhere from 2 feet off of our physical body to 5 or 6 feet. And now with ascension, with the ascending frequencies of the planet, our aura can be 2 miles. So we can literally be picking up the lower frequency from a 2-mile radius. And we're just thinking, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Yeah, it's never the happy stuff, like you said. It's always the sad and unhappy and sorrow, and you just feel like crying all of a sudden for no reason, and you're not sure why. But with me, I start thinking, oh gosh, is something going to happen to somebody I know? And it took me a long time to figure out, no, that's probably not what it is. It's just something is going on somewhere, and it's not necessarily someone you know or you love. So that's always that was a hard one to come to terms with as well.
And another thing,
and
though,
also, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, as a society, it's really kind of sad that, a lot of us that are empaths, we are diagnosed with some sort of mental illness, and you go into these providers and they ask questions like, are you seeing things or hearing voices? And we all know to never answer that question in the affirmative.
It's not yes.
We do not. I mean, even my daughter, she's like, I already know, because she had spent a few days in a lockdown and does not ever want to do that again. And there should be an avenue by which you can express what is happening to you without the judgment that you are cuckoo and something is wrong with you, because we are all capable of to some level.
Yeah, exactly. And it's part of a lot of cultures in society where it is acceptable. It's a part of what their life is. And that was one of the interesting opportunities when I moved to London, was that it is, the paranormal or the occult is a part of their society. Now, it's still fringed, but it's much more integrated. So one of the schools, because I literally went to the College of Psychic Studies and I went to the School of Intuition and Healing, where I was formally trained by other psychics and intuitives. And the School of Intuition and Healing was basically started by a psychic who was also essentially a social worker, who had worked for the NHS. And so she knew that a lot of the experiences that her clients were having were spiritual or energetic experiences. And so she opened up this school to teach other, not just intuitives, but even conventional practitioners, because at least in London, more people were open to something's going on with my client. It's not physical. And yes, there's a mental or an emotional part, but it's not following or tracking some of these conventional things. It's not like I can't give this person a clinical diagnosis because there's something else. And I can even sense that something else, but I don't know what I'm sensing.
Right.
So And I personally have found that even though conventional therapists in this country are not as open to admitting it publicly, that privately they will admit it. So one of the reasons why I work in Salem is because when I was living in London, I would come back to America in the summertime because I had a home close to Salem. And there was a conventional psychologist whose clients had attended some workshops, and they had told her about the experience, and she got in touch with me and said, I'm having these experiences. I can't let anybody know about it because, I'm worried about my reputation and my license, etc. And I ended up opening my office with a suite of conventional psychologists, some of which would refer their client down the hall. So to say, you might want to explore this and see if this is helpful to you.
Yeah, there's I guess there is a very interesting line between like the mental health as they say it is and what people feel, and and your spiritual, your empath ability. That light keeps turning off on Michele. There it is. Michelle's secretly going, turn off. So tell us a little bit. Now, I was doing some research. What's a soul doula? Now, I read somewhere where, is that something that you also practice or do? What exactly is that?
So there's a few different ways to answer the question. So a soul doula is something that it's similar to this idea of a midwife. So we have practitioners who assist in the birth of a soul coming into the earth, and then there are people that assist on the transition of the soul leaving the body.
Okay.
Now, on one level, in a conventional training, it might be the type of thing where it's a little bit of grief counseling. It might be some learning about energy work, some Reiki, so to help the person calm as they're transitioning. But for somebody who's cultivated their extrasensory perceptions, it can be something very different. So for instance, some of the work that I do, I don't prominently talk about the mediumistic work that I do or this work, because it's more physically exhausting than some of the other work that I do. But essentially what you're doing is, as a person is starting to make that transition, the veils are getting really thin. And so part of what I have done is I will help facilitate that space between the physical realm and these ascending frequencies. So I will call in angelic energies, because at the passing of the soul from the body, there are higher dimensional beings of light who come and help assist. So it's really helping that soul leave the container of the physical body, because the reality is we're eternal. Energy never dies, it just changes form. So it's helping that shifting of the form, because a lot of people are really afraid of death and dying.
Right.
And, again, it's like taboo, like mental health, like intuition, like our extrasensory perceptions. When the reality is the experience that I have witnessed clairvoyantly, either objectively with my own two eyes or subjectively, like a dream or a movie in my mind, it's a blissful moment. When those moments between one form to the other is this blissful moment.
You're leaving pain and suffering, that you're a diseased body that's broken down, and going to somewhere else. I had that experience when my father passed. I happened to be sitting right with him when he made the transition, and his energy went right through me. And at that point, it was really hard for me to be, yes, it was a loss and really sad, but I felt that relief that he had felt when he left, because he was suffering from cancer. He weighed 100 pounds. It was really, really difficult. But the main, the learning from that was when he passed through me, I now know what his energy feels like. And so when I encounter him in various places, I know it's him. Yeah. And it was a really, really beautiful experience.
Isn't that, and that's the thing too, that when we're not allowed to have these feelings and these awarenesses, that when we lose someone, it's so heartbreaking and soul crushing. And it's not to say that even when you know that consciousness never dies and that we're eternal, doesn't mean that you don't still experience grief, but you are able to experience connection.
Yeah.
So when the synchronicities come, when your loved one draws in, so when they lower their frequency and your frequency is raised, and maybe it's raised because you're listening to music, you're around crystals, there's a higher frequency within you, then you meet in the middle and you can have these visits with your loved ones that are so beautiful. But a lot of times things are really subtle. And again, that's when the brain goes, this is my imagination. And it's like, no, you're actually robbing yourself of the visit from your loved one.
And then sometimes he just bonks me over the head. Well, he did that one time. I dropped a shower curtain on my head to tell me I was being an idiot, because I was.
Well,
Like,
you know, they never stopped, even in the afterlife.
Subtle energy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not. He's not usually too subtle.
So Michele told me he leaves you dimes.
He leaves me dimes.
Dimes.
And he leaves my daughter dimes as well. Yeah. So we always know when he's
amazing.
around. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the things that you do in Salem. Spiritual counseling, energy practitioner. What does that involve?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different things that I do, because when I went on the quest to open up, it really started a quest of like trying to figure out everything and trying to learn everything. So people will come to me for so many different things. Sometimes people come in for a reading. It'll be an intuitive reading. Sometimes I'll work with their guides and guardians. Sometimes it'll be mediumistic. I usually refer, like if people come to me for mediumistic readings, there are other people who do readings all day long, but if they come to me, it's really to facilitate a healing experience. It's really it's like family therapy. Where we're really going to do some therapeutic work. An energy practitioner is essentially every single thing is energy. Everything is energy. So if our energy is grounded, if it's clear, if it's vibrant, then we're in tune with our knowing, with our intuition, even if we don't realize that we are. And so we're able to live a happier, healthier life where we're kind of following the path to whatever it is that's going to fulfill our hopes and dreams. So you clear the energy. So you're clearing either for the empath what they've absorbed that doesn't belong to them, or you're clearing the last 4 years of COVID and the pandemic and all the other things, or you're clearing, sometimes it's, because again, it's a wide toolkit. Sometimes I'm clearing people that'll say I feel cursed. Bad things happen to me all the time. Sometimes there's a literal curse. Sometimes the person's cursed themselves because they believe that they've been cursed and they keep saying it and it becomes a thought form and then it manifests. So it can be so many different things. Some people work with me more about unlocking their own potential, learning about esoteric things. So it's really like, I consider myself a bespoke practitioner that we can address what's going on in the mind, the body, or the spirit. And sometimes we're doing all of it. And sometimes we're just kind of focusing on one thing. Sometimes people use me more as like a life coach or a conventional therapist, or working with couples, because again, everything is energy. And I think one of the benefits of working with somebody that's intuitive, you kind of cut to the chase really quickly. So the time together can be really productive.
Right. I know that I've seen you a couple times, and like you mentioned, with my, as a paranormal investigator, it's good to go in and get, to get your energies cleared, at least 4 times a year, right? Quarterly. Yeah. So I've got to come in September. But yeah, well,
Yeah, especially.
yeah, when my daughter came in, what I thought was so amazing is like my sister and I were sitting there, and she's got my daughter on the table, and she looks over, she goes, well, "Who's the man in the woods?" And I was just like, "What?" Because in Minnesota, the kids, and we always felt like there was a man in the woods, and that was like from, several years, and then you picked up on it right away, and I know that you had cleared that out of her, and the house we were in was
Right.
very haunted. So I know that I brought her because I was pretty sure she had some kind of attachment as well. So
Yeah.
and what else is funny is like she finally got cleared, right? And then I brought her on the USS Salem. Not a smart idea. Because all of a sudden, as soon as we stepped off that Salem, I saw that same personality come back, and I was like, "Uh-oh!" So we had to do a little bit more clearing, but
Yeah, that's the whole thing. When the soul leaves the body, there's different reasons why the soul doesn't cross over, and it's usually it's kind of like a combination of scenarios. One scenario is that they do not want to leave their loved one, their spouse, their children. So it's kind of like one of the scenes in Ghost with Patrick Swayze and
Right.
Demi Moore, where he's trying to get back into his body. That's really what does happen, that the person is trying to almost like reanimate themselves because they cannot leave their family. Another thing is that sometimes the death is so traumatic that the soul is in shock, and because the soul is in shock, the soul needs help it can fracture at the moment of death, so it needs help coming back in so that it's then able to cross. Sometimes a person doesn't have a belief system, so when you're dead, you're dead, and because of that, it's like they're resisting the part of them that is divine, the part of them is eternal. And then there are sometimes it's because they don't know that they've passed, that it could have been a drug overdose when they're in an altered state, and then it kind of blends into this other state. So what happens over time is, for the disincarnated spirit, there's no time or space. They're kind of locked in the moment around their death. But at some point, it could be 100 years, and it could feel like it's just a second. At some point, there's some awareness that tells them, I need to go to the light. And then what they're doing is they're looking for the light. So your daughter is the light. So Michele, you're the light. So Sondra, you're the light. And the energy comes to you. Now, they're not necessarily going to attach to your field. They
Right.
might be in your, like in the cascade of your aura. They attach to your field, and they become a spirit attachment only under very specific scenarios. So essentially, if you are fully in your body, fully grounded, you can't have a spirit attachment. So spirit attachments come when a person is out of their body. Now, you could be out because of trauma, because of surgery, because of medication. So it can happen, and maybe even, in my opinion, spirit attachments are very unusual. Although since lockdown, I was at one point I was averaging like 9 emails a week. People calling, like getting in touch with me saying I have a spirit attachment. And I thought, how are people hearing about this? Because it's something that a lot of people don't even know. But
a lot of
we're going through
research.
so much.
Too much time
Yeah.
on Google.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of time on
Yeah.
their hands. But all right, so I know that you have a huge waiting list for appointments right now. But how can someone get in touch with you?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. So one is I have a Patreon account. So it's a community where a lot of my teaching, my writing, my meditations, etc., are on Patreon, and it can be self-serve, but there's always, like, several times a month, there's different Zoom sessions where I'll be hosting a meditation or a class.
I've seen that.
And There's one level that kind of guarantees a person a monthly appointment with me. Otherwise, it's going to my website, which is my name, and looking at what my availability is. So it's not terrible right now. I think I'm booking into the end of September, the beginning of October.
Okay, so yeah, that's amazing, and I have learned so much here today, and I really appreciate your time.
Right.
And I'll be seeing you soon.
And I will definitely check out that Patreon account.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But
No, thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. This is, paranormal, metaphysics, spirituality, energy. These are all things that I'm really interested in and passionate about. And actually, that's another thing, just as a way that people can be in contact. I have, if you look up my name, there's a YouTube channel. I also have an Instagram account where every morning I get up at sunrise, or most mornings I get up at sunrise. Sometimes I'm a little bit later, and I go down and I do a meditation where I'm incorporating different ritual, different alchemy to ground the body, to clear the energy field, to open, and then to really start igniting people into really discovering who we all are. Mm-hmm. So that's a way that people can, join this experience without having to put a lot of effort into it.
That's amazing. Well, we appreciate your time. I mean, this was great. I think you're amazing. So thank you for joining us. And
it was great to speak with you both.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Kristen, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
very
Kristen
great.
is just, and the things that she's experienced are just incredible. Some of the things that I honestly have never experienced, but I can just imagine, thinking, as a younger child, as Michele, because it's all these things that you went through, and it was just good to speak with her.
Yeah. Terrific.
And
Great segment.
and if you want to learn more, Michele had said earlier how to get in touch with us. If you want to learn more about us.
Yep. You can check us out on the socials, the Greater Boston Paranormal Associates. We have a YouTube channel, Greater Boston Paranormal TV and Greater Boston Paranormal Associates, right?
I believe so.
And you can always check out the USS Salem Paranormal Experience and visit us on the USS Salem. So thanks everyone for joining tonight. I did want to just give a shout out. A lot of our viewers and followers have been asking about our fearless leader, Don DeCristofaro. He's on a little bit of a break dealing with some stuff. And we hope to have him back soon. But if you're so inclined, send some words up, please, that he comes back to us healthy and ready to go. Because we miss him quite a bit. But anyway, that's our episode for now. We are the Greater Boston Paranormal Associates. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.